Pacific Beach, California, 2015. The crystal-clear waters of the Pacific Ocean hold secrets that remain untouched for decades. On that sunny September day, two recreational divers, Michael Chen and Robert Martinez, were preparing for another routine exploration in the nearshore depths. Equipped with oxygen tanks and underwater cameras, they had no idea they were about to discover something that would forever change understanding of one of the most intriguing disappearance cases of World War II. 25 meters deep, among rocks covered with seaweed and colorful corals, something metallic reflected the sun's rays that penetrated the water. Chen, an experienced diver with more than 15 years of practice, cautiously approached the object. It was not common to find wreckage in that region, especially something that seemed so well preserved. When his gloved hands touched the cold surface of the metal, he immediately realized that it was something far more significant than marine litter or abandoned fishing gear. It was an American military helmet, model M1 from World War II, used by the forces of the United States Marine Corps. The equipment showed clear signs of marine corrosion, but remained surprisingly intact. On the sides of the helmet, markings and identification numbers that had withstood 7 decades, submerged in the waters of the Pacific, were still visible. Martinez, who was documenting the entire exploration with his camera, captured detailed images of the find, while Chen carefully removed the helmet from the ocean floor. Back on the surface, the two divers thoroughly examined the helmet in the Californian sunlight. The numbers engraved on the metal revealed crucial information. The identification 237489 and the initials TH were clearly marked on the inside of the equipment. Chen, who was knowledgeable about local military history, knew that this discovery could be related to the mysterious events that took place in Pacific Beach during the last months of World War II. The region had been the scene of intense military exercises, and several local stories told about accidents and disappearances that were never fully clarified by the authorities. The discovery of the helmet reignited one of the most enigmatic cases in American military history: the disappearance of Marine Thomas Harrison, only 22 years old, who had disappeared without a trace on August 16, 1945, just one day after the announcement of Japan's surrender. Harrison was participating in routine military exercises when he simply faded away, leaving behind only unanswered questions and a family desperate for information. Now, 70 years later, that helmet emerged from the depths like a message from the past, promising to finally reveal the secrets the ocean had held for so long. News of the helmet's discovery spread quickly through veteran circles and military historians in the region. Within 48 hours, Chen and Martinez received a call that would completely change the course of the investigation. On the other end of the line was Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, a historian specializing in World War II military records and a researcher at the National Archives in College Park, Maryland. Morrison had spent the last 30 years cataloging unsolved cases of missing soldiers, and the name Thomas Harrison was in his files as one of the most intriguing mysteries of the West Coast. Morrison explained to the divers that Harrison's case had been classified as disappearance under undetermined circumstances by official military files. The Marine had been deployed to Pendleton Field, a military base located approximately 40 miles south of Pacific Beach, where he was participating in amphibious training exercises. These exercises simulated landings on hostile beaches, preparing the Marines for possible operations in the Pacific, even as the war drew to a close. On the day of his disappearance, Harrison had been assigned to a coastal reconnaissance mission that was supposed to last only 4 hours. The official records that Morrison had consulted over the years revealed disturbing inconsistencies. The initial report, dated August 17, 1945, indicated that Harrison had last been seen at 6 o'clock in the morning, heading alone to the Pacific Beach area in a military jeep. Its mission was to map possible landing points and assess the conditions of local sea currents. The vehicle was found parked near the cliffs, with all equipment intact, including maps, compass, and field radio. There were no signs of a struggle or any indication that anything extraordinary had occurred. What intrigued Morrison most was the fact that no official search had been documented in the archives. In similar cases of disappearances during the war, military protocols called for rescue operations lasting at least a week, involving multiple units and specialized equipment. In the Harrison case, only a brief note mentioned local searches carried out without success, and the case was quickly filed as soldier presumably lost in action. This lack of detailed documentation was highly unusual by military standards at the time, especially considering that the war had officially ended. Dr. Morrison revealed yet another disconcerting aspect. During her research in the archives, she had discovered that Thomas Harrison was not the only military man missing in that region during the same period. Between July and September of 1945, at least 3 other soldiers had disappeared under similar circumstances along the Californian coast. All were young, all were on solitary reconnaissance missions, and all cases were quickly shelved without in-depth investigations. The discovery of Harrison's helmet could be the key to understanding not only the fate of a soldier, but unraveling a much broader and disturbing pattern of disappearances that had been systematically concealed for 7 decades. The investigation took a completely new direction when Morrison arrived in San Diego 3 days after the helmet was discovered. Accompanied by 2 marine archaeology experts from the University of California, she met with Chen and Martinez at the exact spot where the helmet had been found. What was supposed to be a simple analysis of the discovery site turned into something much more significant when divers revealed that they had returned to the site the day before and found other objects buried in the sand of the ocean floor. Scattered within a radius of approximately 50 meters from the original point, the divers had located fragments of military equipment that clearly belonged to the same historical period. Among the finds was a corroded but still legible military nameplate that confirmed the name Thomas H. Harrison and his service number. Also recovered were the remains of a military canvas backpack, a navigational compass, and, most intriguingly, fragments of documents sealed in a waterproof case that had partially resisted marine corrosion over the decades. The documents recovered from the case represented an extraordinary discovery. Although damaged by saltwater and time, it was still possible to decipher significant parts of Harrison's handwritten text. The pages revealed that the young Marine had been recording detailed observations about strange movements on the coast during his reconnaissance missions. His notes mentioned unidentified vessels that appeared near the coast during the early hours of the morning, always between 2 and 4 o'clock in the morning, and that disappeared before dawn. Morrison carefully examined the fragments of text that could be saved. One particularly intriguing passage, dated August 12, 1945, just 4 days before Harrison's disappearance, described third consecutive night, observing unconventional lights approximately 2 miles offshore. Movement pattern inconsistent with known military vessels. Attempted radio contact resulted in significant interference. Commander Johnson directed to continue observations without reporting via official channels. This reference to Commander Johnson was particularly significant, as no officer by that name was recorded in the official records of Harrison's unit. Analysis of the objects by conservation experts has revealed even more mysteries. The helmet had damage that was not consistent with natural marine corrosion. There were marks that suggested deliberate impact, and metallurgical tests indicated that the equipment had been exposed to extremely high temperatures before sinking into the ocean. The canvas backpack contained unidentified chemical residues that did not match any known material used by the American Army during the war. These findings raised disturbing questions about the actual circumstances of Harrison's disappearance and suggested that he might have been involved in something far more complex and dangerous than a simple coastal reconnaissance mission. The physical evidence was beginning to paint a completely different picture of the events of August 1945. The search for the mysterious Commander Johnson has become a top priority for Morrison and his team. Using digitized military databases and physical files that had never been transferred to electronic systems, the historian discovered something that completely changed her perspective on the case. There were no official records of any Commander Johnson serving in the San Diego area during August 1945. This absence was not simply a gap in the documentation, it was as if such a person had never existed in conventional military records. The investigation took an unexpected turn when Morrison decided to consult naval intelligence files that had been partially declassified in the 90s. Buried among thousands of routine documents, she found a cryptic reference to Operation Coastal Watch, a highly secret surveillance program that had been implemented along the American West Coast during the final months of the war. The program utilized selected soldiers to monitor suspicious activity related to possible Japanese and German espionage operations that continued even after the official surrender. Operation Coastal Watch documents revealed that soldiers like Harrison were often deployed for ground observation missions, unbeknownst to their immediate superiors in the regular chain of command. These soldiers reported directly to intelligence officers operating under false identities to maintain the secrecy of the operation. The name Commander Johnson appeared in several references as one of the regional coordinators of the program, always described only by this code name. The discovery explained why there were no official records of searches when Harrison disappeared. His actual mission was classified, and his disappearance could not be investigated without exposing the entire operation. Morrison further discovered that Operation Coastal Watch had been created in response to intelligence reports about a possible Japanese submarine infiltration program off the Californian coast. Documents dated June 1945 indicated that American intelligence had intercepted communications suggesting that Japanese submarines continued to operate near the American coast even after Japan's surrender. These submarines were allegedly involved in evacuation missions of Japanese spy agents and scientists who had remained in the United States during the war. The connection between Harrison and this covert operation began to make sense when Morrison examined the disappearance patterns of the other soldiers mentioned earlier. All had disappeared at strategic locations along the coast. All were on solitary reconnaissance missions, and all cases had been quickly dropped without investigation. Even more disturbing was the fact that all of these disappearances took place over a 3-week period between late July and mid-August of 1945. Harrison's notes on unidentified craft and mysterious lights suggested that he had uncovered evidence of this clandestine Japanese operation. The question that remained was whether Harrison had become an accidental victim of this covert operation, or if he had stumbled upon something even more sinister that cost him the lives of himself and other American soldiers. The investigation took a dramatic leap when Morrison received an unexpected call from Margaret Harrison Sullivan, Thomas Harrison's niece, who had been 86 years old and resided in Portland, Oregon. Margaret had read about the discovery of the helmet in a local newspaper and decided to contact the historian. What she revealed during her first telephone conversation completely changed the understanding about the events of 1945 and brought a deeply personal family perspective to the mystery. Margaret explained that her Uncle Thomas had sent a letter to his mother, his sister, just 2 days before he disappeared. This letter, which had been kept in a box of family documents for 7 decades, contained information that no one outside the family had seen. In the letter, Harrison expressed specific concerns about his safety and mentioned that he had discovered something I shouldn't have seen during his night patrols. Most significantly, he had instructed his sister to turn over the letter to the authorities only if something happened to her. But the family had never been officially informed of her disappearance by the military. When Morrison traveled to Portland to examine the letter in person, she was struck by the level of detail Harrison had recorded. The correspondence, written on official Marine Corps letterhead, described encounters with unidentified submerged vessels that regularly appeared in the waters near Pacific Beach. Harrison had documented at least 5 different sightings between August 5 and 13, always during the early hours of the morning. Their descriptions included technical details about the estimated size of the vessels, movement patterns, and light signals that seemed to follow a specific code. The letter further revealed that Harrison had attempted to report these sightings through official channels, but had been instructed by the mysterious Commander Johnson to maintain silent observation until further notice. Harrison expressed frustration with this order, especially since he believed that the vessels were unloading people or equipment at isolated points on the California coast. In one particularly telling passage, he wrote, "I saw at least 12 individuals being transported from the boats to shore using small inflatable boats. I tried to approach for identification, but was intercepted by patrols who claimed to be conducting classified military exercises." Margaret also revealed that the Harrison family had received an official visit 3 weeks after Thomas's disappearance. 2 men identifying themselves as military intelligence officers had come to the family home, requesting all the personal belongings and correspondence that Thomas might have sent during his last weeks of service. The family, devastated by the loss and with no official information about Thomas's fate, had delivered everything except this last letter, which Thomas's mother had hidden by instinct. The visitors had been vague about the circumstances of the disappearance, mentioning only that Thomas had been involved in sensitive operations and that his case would remain classified on national security grounds. This official visit had never been documented in the military records that Morrison had examined, suggesting that a completely different level of government operations involved in the Harrison case existed. Harrison's letter provided enough clues for Morrison to organize a more comprehensive marine expedition to the site of the original discovery. In partnership with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, it obtained authorization to use advanced sonar equipment and unmanned underwater vehicles to fully map the ocean floor in a 5-square-kilometer area around the point where the helmet had been found. What they discovered during this systematic exploration exceeded all expectations and transformed the Harrison case from an isolated mystery into something of monumental historical proportions. The high-resolution sonars identified at least 17 structural anomalies on the ocean floor, scattered at different depths between 20 and 40 meters. When underwater vehicles were sent to investigate these anomalies, they revealed wreckage that was clearly not of American origin. The first structure examined in detail was unambiguously the remains of a submarine, but its configuration and design did not match any known vessel of the American or Allied fleet during World War II. Experts in marine archaeology immediately recognized distinctive features of Japanese naval engineering from the late war period. The most extraordinary discovery came when the expert divers descended to examine the wreckage of the submarine in person. The vessel was largely intact, preserved by the specific conditions of the local ocean floor. Japanese symbols were still visible on the hull, and the numbering identified the submarine as I-402, a vessel that had officially been registered as sunk in the South Pacific during a naval battle in March 1945. Finding this submarine in Californian waters, 5 months after its supposed destruction, raised fundamental questions about the official records of the war and suggested much more extensive Japanese operations off the American coast than had ever been publicly admitted. The interior of the submarine revealed even more disturbing evidence. The compartments contained documents in Japanese that, when translated by experts, described an operation called Kaze Tachinu, meaning the wind rises. This operation apparently involved the secret transport of high-ranking Japanese scientists and officers to evacuation points along the American west coast, utilizing a network of submarines that operated completely outside of official naval records. The documents indicated that this evacuation had begun in June 1945, almost 2 months before Japan's official surrender, suggesting that elements of the Japanese leadership already knew that the war was lost and were organizing escape routes. Even more shocking was the discovery that the Kaze Tachinu operation was not exclusively Japanese. Documents found in a sealed compartment of the submarine revealed English correspondence between Japanese officers and American contacts, indicating some sort of secret agreement or collaboration. A letter dated July 1945, signed only as Johnson, offered limited logistical cooperation in exchange for specific information on technologies developed during the conflict. This discovery suggested that the mysterious Commander Johnson was not simply monitoring Japanese activities. He could have been facilitating or even coordinating part of the evacuation operation. Analysis of the wreckage also revealed evidence that the submarine I-402 had been deliberately sabotaged. Controlled explosions had damaged the propulsion and navigation systems, but in a way calculated to allow the vessel to sink in relatively shallow water, where it could potentially be recovered in the future. This discovery raised the possibility that Harrison had witnessed not only Japanese evacuation operations, but also American operations aimed at recovering valuable technology or information from the sunken submarines. If this theory was correct, Harrison had become a threat not only to covert Japanese operations, but also to unauthorized American operations that violated international war agreements. The implications of this discovery extended far beyond Thomas Harrison's individual fate. The existence of the Kaze Tachinu operation and the possible involvement of American officers suggested that significant aspects of the official history of World War II had been deliberately omitted or falsified. Morrison realized that he had stumbled upon something that could rewrite the historical understanding of the end of the war in the Pacific and of the actual activities of American forces on the West Coast during 1945. The central question now was not just what had happened to Harrison, But how many other people had been eliminated to protect these secrets, and how far American authorities were willing to go to keep these operations buried at the bottom of the ocean? The discovery of the Japanese submarine set in motion a series of events that Morrison had never predicted. 48 hours after the first report about the wreckage was sent to the appropriate authorities, she received an unexpected visitor at her hotel in San Diego. 3 men wearing dark suits identified themselves as Department of Homeland Security agents and requested a private meeting about their recent research activities. The formal and slightly intimidating nature of the approach made it clear that the investigation had touched on matters that were still considered sensitive by federal authorities, even 7 decades after the original events. During the meeting, the lead agent, who identified himself only as Agent Williams, explained that certain aspects of Morrison's research were interfering with ongoing national security issues. He revealed that the U.S. government had known about the existence of the Japanese submarine wreckage for several decades, but had classified this information due to the complex diplomatic implications involved. Williams suggested that Morrison should limit his research to the purely historical aspects of Harrison's disappearance, avoiding any further exploration of the underwater wreckage or public disclosure of its existence. Morrison, experienced in dealing with government classifications due to his work with military archives, immediately realized that he was facing something much bigger than he had imagined. She questioned Williams about the specific nature of the security concerns, especially considering that World War II had ended 70 years ago. The answer was revealing. Williams explained that some of the individuals evacuated during the Kaze Tachinu operation were still alive, and that exposure of their identities or activities could jeopardize ongoing international intelligence operations. This statement confirmed that the Japanese evacuation had not been just an isolated historical episode, but part of a network of operations that had continued to function for decades. The conversation took an even more intriguing turn when Williams inadvertently revealed that the U.S. government had been monitoring Morrison's research activities for several weeks, even before the discovery of Harrison's helmet. He mentioned that authorities were aware of his inquiries to Operation Coastal Watch's archives and his communications with Margaret Harrison Sullivan. This revelation suggested that there was an active surveillance system for anyone who got too close to these specific matters, indicating that the secrets related to the events of 1945 were still considered vital to American national security. Williams concluded the meeting by offering Morrison a cooperative agreement that would allow her to continue her research on Thomas Harrison specifically, but on the condition that she sign confidentiality agreements on any discoveries related to submarine operations or Commander Johnson's activities. In return, he promised access to classified files that could provide definitive information about Harrison's fate. Morrison requested time to consider the proposal, but he knew he had reached a crucial point. Accepting the agreement would mean abandoning the search for the full truth, but refusing could result in the closure of his investigation altogether through legal channels. After the agents left, Morrison made a decision that would completely change the course of the investigation. Instead of immediately accepting or rejecting the government agreement, she decided to drastically speed up her research and make her findings public before they could be officially suppressed. She contacted investigative journalists at 3 different major media outlets, providing copies of all the documents and evidence she had collected up to that point. His strategy was to create a situation where suppressing information would become more damaging to the government than allowing the truth to come out. This courageous decision would ensure that the story of Thomas Harrison and the secrets of the Japanese submarine would not disappear again into the depths of government classification. Morrison's strategy of making his findings public had immediate and unexpected consequences. Within 24 hours of contacting journalists, she received a call that would completely change her understanding of the entire operation. On the other end of the line was an elderly man with a slightly Japanese accent who identified himself as Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka, a retired professor of marine engineering at Kyoto University. Tanaka explained that he had read about Morrison's findings through international academic contacts and that he had crucial information about the Kaze Tachinu operation that no one else in the world knew about. Tanaka revealed that in 1945, he was a young Japanese naval intelligence officer of only 23 years old, assigned specifically to coordinate technical aspects of the Kaze Tachinu operation. He had been one of the few survivors of the crew of the submarine I-402 and had personally witnessed the events that led to the sinking of the vessel. Most importantly, he had been present during the secret negotiations with American officials that facilitated the evacuation of Japanese scientists in exchange for advanced military technologies that Japan had developed during the final years of the war. During a carefully encrypted video call, Tanaka provided details that fully validated Morrison's findings. He confirmed that Commander Johnson was real and explained that his real name was Colonel James Mitchell, an American intelligence officer who had been secretly assigned to establish channels of communication with moderate elements of the Japanese military leadership. Mitchell had convinced his superiors that certain Japanese technologies, especially related to advanced submarine propulsion and underwater communication systems, were vital to American preparedness against a possible future Soviet threat in the Pacific. Tanaka further revealed that Thomas Harrison had discovered much more than simple evacuation operations. On the night of August 15, 1945, Harrison had witnessed the transfer of 3 Japanese scientists specializing in experimental propulsion technology, along with technical documents and prototypes of equipment that had never been revealed to the Allies during the official surrender negotiations. These scientists were being secretly transported to American facilities where they would continue their research under false identities, in direct violation of international agreements that required the surrender of all Japanese military scientists for trial for war crimes. Tanaka's account of Harrison's fate was devastating and revealed the true nature of the events of August 16. Harrison had attempted to photographically document the transfer of the Japanese scientists, using a camera he had smuggled in during his reconnaissance missions. When he was discovered by Colonel Mitchell and an American security team, Harrison refused to hand over the photographic film, arguing that he had a duty to report violations of military protocols to his legitimate superiors. Mitchell, realizing that exposure of the operation could result in international scandal and possibly treason charges, ordered Harrison to be detained. Tanaka's version of Harrison's final moments was particularly shocking. The young Marine had been taken to the submarine I-402, where Mitchell planned to keep him detained until the Kaze Tachinu operation was completed. However, Harrison managed to escape during a moment of distraction and attempted to swim back to shore, carrying the photographic film with him in a waterproof case. Mitchell, desperate to retrieve the photographic evidence, ordered snipers to fire warning shots, but in the darkness and confusion of the situation, Harrison was fatally shot. His body and photographic film sank into the ocean, and Mitchell ordered the submarine to be immediately sabotaged and sunk to eliminate any evidence of the operation, sacrificing even some of his own men to protect the secret. This final revelation explained not only the fate of Thomas Harrison, but also the deliberate nature of the sinking of the submarine and the complete official suppression of any investigation into the disappearance. Tanaka's revelations motivated Morrison to make a risky decision that could provide definitive physical evidence to support the Japanese officer's testimony. With the help of Chen and Martinez, she organized an unauthorized submarine expedition to the submarine I-402, utilizing advanced diving equipment discreetly borrowed from colleagues in the marine scientific community. The goal was to locate and recover the photographic film that Harrison had tried to preserve, which Tanaka said should be somewhere near the wreckage of the submarine, inside the waterproof case that the young Marine was carrying when he was killed. The descent into the wreckage of the submarine revealed details that dramatically confirmed Tanaka's version of the events of August 1945. The hull of the submarine had explosion damage that was clearly intentional, concentrated specifically in the command and communication compartments. Most significantly, divers found evidence that the submarine had been quickly evacuated prior to sabotage, with personal equipment and documents strewn across the interior of the vessel in a way that suggested a hasty and chaotic exit. In a partially collapsed compartment near the stern of the submarine, Martinez located human remains that had been preserved by the specific conditions of the ocean floor. Preliminary analysis of the bones and uniform fragments indicated that they were at least 2 individuals, one clearly identified as an American military due to the buttons and insignia on the uniform, and another who wore civilian clothes that could belong to one of the Japanese scientists mentioned by Tanaka. This macabre discovery confirmed that the sinking of the submarine had resulted in multiple casualties, not just Harrison, and that Mitchell had been willing to sacrifice American and Japanese lives to protect the secrecy of the operation. The search for Harrison's photographic case focused on an area of approximately 50 square meters around the wreckage, where ocean currents would likely have deposited heavy objects during the past 7 decades. Using underwater metal detectors and archaeological excavation techniques adapted for the marine environment, the team methodically worked through layers of sediment and debris. After 6 hours of intense searching, Chen located a metal object buried nearly 2 meters deep in the sand, which turned out to be a waterproof military case of the type used to carry sensitive photographic equipment during World War II. The case was severely corroded, but its rugged design had partially protected the contents inside. When opened under controlled conditions on the surface, it revealed not only the photographic film that Harrison had tried to preserve, but also additional documents that the young Marine had collected during his surveillance missions. The film, although damaged by decades of saltwater exposure, still contained partially visible footage that clearly showed the transfer of individuals between the Japanese submarine and smaller American vessels. Some photographs captured faces that could be identified, including one image that perfectly matched Tanaka's descriptions of Colonel Mitchell. Even more revealing were the documents Harrison had secretly copied, including written orders authorizing the relocation of Japanese technical assets to American research facilities and lists of names of scientists who were to be given new security identities for integration into military development programs. These documents, signed by high-ranking American officers whose names were still recognizable in modern military history, provided irrefutable documentary evidence that the Kaze Tachinu operation had been not only known about, but actively supported by the highest levels of the American military command. The discovery of these documents transformed the Harrison case from a historical investigation into evidence of war crimes that had been systematically covered up for 7 decades. The recovery of Harrison's film and documents represented a pivotal moment in the investigation, but it also put Morrison and his team in considerable danger. They now possessed physical evidence that could expose government operations that apparently remained protected by national security classifications. The question that presented itself was how to make these findings public without endangering their own lives, especially considering that Thomas Harrison had been killed precisely for trying to do the same thing 7 decades earlier. Morrison realized that she had crossed a line that put her in direct conflict not only with the official story, but with government interests that still considered these secrets vital to American national security. Morrison's situation became dramatically more dangerous when she discovered that her hotel was under discreet surveillance and that her communications were being monitored. Chen, who had noticed suspicious vehicles in the parking lot for 3 consecutive days, warned Morrison of the need to immediately change their security strategy. Using knowledge gained from colleagues working on witness protection in war crimes cases, Morrison developed a plan to distribute copies of the physical evidence among multiple academic and journalistic institutions simultaneously, creating a situation where suppressing information would become virtually impossible. The first phase of the plan involved quietly contacting Dr. Sarah Chen, an expert in the preservation of historical documents at Stanford University, who had previously worked with classified archives during government declassification processes. Chen agreed to receive and authenticate Harrison's photographs and documents at his academic premises, which offered additional legal protection due to university status. Simultaneously, Morrison sent digital copies of the evidence to investigative journalists in 5 different countries, including reporters specializing in historical war crimes in the United Kingdom, Germany, and Japan. The US government's response was swift and coordinated. 24 hours after Morrison distributed the evidence, she received a court subpoena ordering the immediate delivery of all materials related to Operation Coastal Watch and prohibiting any further disclosure of the information under penalty of charges of violation of the Espionage Act. The subpoena was accompanied by a letter from the federal prosecutor that explained that Morrison's activities had compromised ongoing national security operations and that she was subject to immediate arrest if she did not fully cooperate with federal authorities. However, Morrison's international distribution strategy had worked better than she had hoped. Journalists in the United Kingdom had already begun publishing preliminary articles about the discovery of the Harrison papers, and Japanese historians were independently confirming aspects of Tanaka's testimony through Japanese archives that had recently been declassified. International pressure forced the US government to adopt a more negotiated approach, resulting in an extraordinary meeting between Morrison, representatives of the Department of Justice, and officials from multiple intelligence agencies. During this meeting, held at a secure federal facility near Washington, Morrison was presented with information that completely changed his understanding of the modern implications of the Harrison case. Federal prosecutor Gerald Hawthorne revealed that the Kazi Tachinu operation had only been the beginning of a much larger program of covert recruitment of Axis scientists that continued for decades after the end of World War II. Many of the Japanese scientists evacuated in 1945 had contributed to crucial technological developments during the Cold War, including advances in submarine propulsion, communication systems, and even space technologies that were central to the Apollo program. Hawthorne explained that publicly revealing the full details of the operation could jeopardize not only the reputations of surviving scientists who had been integrated into the American tech establishment, but also expose recruitment and relocation methods that were still being used in modern intelligence operations. He offered Morrison an unprecedented settlement. The government would officially recognize Thomas Harrison's sacrifice and provide compensation to his family, but in return, Morrison would have to agree to limit his public disclosure to the humanitarian aspects of the case, avoiding specific details about the technologies transferred or the names of the scientists involved. Morrison found himself facing a decision that would define not only his career, but potentially Thomas Harrison's historical legacy. Accepting the deal would mean that Harrison would be officially recognized as a hero who died trying to expose illegal operations, but many of the details about the full extent of the American-Japanese collaboration would remain classified. Rejecting the deal could result in his arrest and the complete suppression of the entire investigation, leaving Harrison's story once again buried in secret files. As he pondered this decision, Morrison realized that he was facing exactly the same moral dilemma that had confronted Thomas Harrison 70 years earlier, choosing between personal safety and revealing historical truth. The crucial difference was that this time, the whole world was watching, and suppressing the truth would be much more difficult than it had been in 1945. 6 months after the establishment of the Independent Commission, the results of the official investigation have exceeded even Morrison's most optimistic expectations. Declassification of the documents revealed that Operation Kazi Tachinu had been only a small part of a massive program called Operation Pacific Paperclip, which had secretly relocated more than 200 Japanese scientists and engineers to American facilities between 1945 and 1952. These scientists had contributed to developments that included advanced naval propulsion systems, underwater communication technologies, and even components that were later used in the American space program. The commission also revealed the fate of other American soldiers who had disappeared under similar circumstances to Harrison. Corporal Marcus Thompson, who disappeared in July 1945 near Monterey, had been killed when he discovered a temporary facility where Japanese scientists were being processed prior to relocation. Sergeant William Rodriguez, who disappeared in September near Santa Barbara, had been eliminated after trying to report suspicious activity involving transfers of Japanese naval technology. All of these soldiers had been systematically removed from official history, their families informed only that they had disappeared in action during routine exercises. The investigation further revealed the true identity and fate of Colonel James Mitchell, the man who had operated under the codename Commander Johnson. Mitchell had continued his intelligence activities for another 2 decades after the war, overseeing similar operations during the Korean War and the early years of the Cold War. He had died in 1973, taking with him the secrets of multiple clandestine operations, but leaving behind personal files that detailed his activities with meticulous precision. These files, discovered in an abandoned safe house in Virginia, provided definitive evidence about the circumstances of Harrison's death and confirmed every detail of Tanaka's testimony. Mitchell's files revealed disturbing psychological aspects about how he had justified his actions. In detailed personal notes, Mitchell described Harrison and the other soldiers killed as casualties necessary to protect superior strategic interests and expressed little remorse for the killings he had ordered. He had kept personal photographs of the soldiers he had ordered to be eliminated, apparently as a macabre form of remembrance, demonstrating a deeply troubled personality who had hidden behind a facade of patriotism and national duty. The most exciting discovery came when the commission located the original photographic film that Harrison had tried to preserve. Using advanced digital restoration technologies, experts were able to recover images that Harrison had captured during his last missions. The photographs clearly showed the transfers of Japanese scientists, including images of the individuals themselves being escorted by American soldiers. One particularly poignant photograph showed Harrison reflected in a glass window as he secretly documented a meeting between Mitchell and Japanese officials, inadvertently capturing his own image at a time when he was risking his life to preserve the truth. The international implications of the revelation were significant. The Japanese government issued an official statement acknowledging that some of its scientists had unwittingly participated in American programs after the war and established a memorial fund to honor both Japanese scientists and American soldiers who had been victimized by the covert operations. Germany and other allied countries have also begun investigations into similar programs that may have operated on their territories during the post-war period. For Margaret Harrison Sullivan, now 87, the full revelation of the truth about her uncle represented the closure of a pain she had carried all her life. During an official ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery, where Thomas Harrison was finally laid to rest with full military honors, Margaret spoke about how the discovery of the helmet had not only revealed the truth about Thomas, but also demonstrated that individual courage can eventually triumph over even the most elaborate conspiracies. His words echoed through a crowd that included veterans, families of other missing soldiers, and representatives of international human rights organizations that had supported the investigation. Morrison, reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a simple underwater discovery, realized that the Harrison case had become much more than a historical investigation. It had turned into a powerful demonstration of how truth, even when buried for decades under layers of classification and cover-up, eventually finds a way to emerge into the light. Thomas Harrison's helmet, corroded by time but preserved by the ocean, had served as a time capsule that finally delivered his message to the world, that some values are too important to be sacrificed, even in the face of death. Today, 10 years after the helmet's initial discovery by Chen and Martinez, Pacific Beach has become a place of pilgrimage for veterans, families of missing soldiers, and anyone interested in honoring those who sacrificed their lives defending the truth. A memorial has been erected at the exact point on the coast where Thomas Harrison was last seen, with a plaque listing not only his name, but also the names of Marcus Thompson, William Rodriguez, and dozens of other soldiers whose stories were revealed through the investigation his helmet initiated. The Thomas Harrison Foundation, established with funds from the government agreement and international donations, has become one of the world's leading organizations dedicated to investigating cases of missing soldiers and exposing military operations that violated human rights during and after international conflicts. The Foundation has helped solve more than 150 cases of mysterious military disappearances around the world, using pioneering investigative methods that combine traditional historical research with modern forensic technologies and underwater archaeology. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, now director of the Foundation, continued her investigations and found that the Kaze Tachinu operation represented only the tip of a much larger iceberg of covert operations that took place during the post-war period. His subsequent research revealed similar programs involving German, Italian, and even Soviet scientists that were secretly integrated into American research programs through methods that often violated international law. Each finding reinforced his conviction that historical transparency is essential to prevent the repetition of abuses of power. Margaret Harrison Sullivan lived to see her 90th birthday, continuing to actively participate in the Foundation's activities until her peaceful death in 2023. In her published memoirs, she wrote that discovering the truth about Thomas had given her not only inner peace, but also the understanding that each individual has the power to make a difference when they choose to uphold fundamental moral principles. His final words about the uncle he never met in person, but who profoundly shaped his life were, "Thomas taught us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to do what is right, even when we know it can cost everything. Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka remained involved with the foundation until his death at the age of 102 in 2019. His last years were dedicated to documenting in detail his experiences during the war and the Kaze Tachinu operation, providing information that helped solve dozens of other mysterious cases. He often said that testifying about Thomas Harrison had been the most important thing I have ever done in a very long life, and that the young Marine's courage had inspired his own decision to finally speak the truth about events he had kept secret for 7 decades. Divers, Chen and Martinez, whose accidental discovery had started the entire investigation, established a marine archaeology company that specialized in locating and investigating underwater sites related to historical conflicts. They continued exploring the waters near Pacific Beach and discovered evidence of other covert operations, including a network of underwater tunnels that had been used to transport sensitive materials during the Cold War. Their findings demonstrated that the region had been a far more important center of intelligence activity than anyone had imagined. Thomas Harrison's story has become the subject of study in universities around the world, not just as a case of successful historical inquiry, but as an example of how ordinary individuals can stand up to systems of power when guided by strong moral convictions. His case is frequently cited in courses on military ethics, human rights, and the importance of government transparency in democratic societies. Most importantly, the discovery of Harrison's helmet catalyzed significant changes in American military transparency policies. New laws have been passed requiring the automatic declassification of documents related to operations that may have violated human rights, and an independent ombudsman has been established to investigate allegations of military cover-ups. These reforms, collectively known as the Harrison Act, ensure that similar cases can no longer be systematically suppressed for decades. In the crystal-clear waters of Pacific Beach, where it all began, divers still occasionally find artifacts related to the covert operations of 1945. Each discovery is carefully catalogued and investigated by the Thomas Harrison Foundation, ensuring that no evidence is lost and that all stories are eventually told. The ocean, once held deadly secrets, now serves as a living historical archive that continues to reveal truths about one of the most complex and morally ambiguous periods in American history. The ultimate lesson of Thomas Harrison's story is that truth, like the ocean, is patient but relentless. It can be contained, targeted, or temporarily dammed, but eventually finds its way to the surface. His helmet, discovered by chance 70 years after his death, proved that even the most deeply buried secrets cannot remain hidden forever when brave people are willing to dive into the depths in search of the truth. And in Pacific Beach, where the waves still crash gently on the Californian coast, a simple sign reminds all who pass by, in memory of Thomas Harrison and all those who chose truth over safety, justice over convenience, and courage over silence. Their voices, once silenced, now echo through the generations. When Chen and Martinez emerged from the waters of Pacific Beach on that September day in 2015, carrying in their hands a helmet corroded by time, they had no idea that they were resurrecting the voice of a hero silenced for 70 years. Thomas Harrison had become more than a lost soldier in history. He had become the symbol that truth possesses an irresistible force, capable of traversing decades of secrets and emerging from the depths when we least expect it. His story teaches us that each seemingly insignificant object can carry within itself the power to rewrite history, and that the oceans, silent guardians of the past, eventually give back everything we try to hide. Harrison's journey reveals a universal truth that transcends eras and borders. There are moments in life when each of us must choose between the safety of silence and the courage of denunciation. The 22-year-old Marine chose the second option, even though he knew it could cost him his life. His decision to document illegal operations, to refuse to hand over evidence that would compromise innocence, and to fight until the last moment for transparency sets a moral standard that remains relevant in our age of disinformation and government secrets. Harrison reminds us that personal integrity is non-negotiable, even when facing infinitely more powerful adversaries. What makes this story even more extraordinary is how it demonstrates the transformative power of scientific persistence and human curiosity. Dr. Morrison could have accepted the official versions, Margaret Harrison Sullivan could have kept her uncle's letter silent forever, and Tanaka could have taken his secrets to the grave, but all chose the courage of inquiry into the convenience of ignorance. They proved that when ordinary people come together in search of truth, they can break down walls of secrecy that seemed impenetrable, turning historical mysteries into powerful lessons for future generations. Operation Kazitachinu and the Paperclip Pacifico program confront us with complex moral questions that echo in our modern times. How many Thomas Harrisons are there today, witnessing operations that violate fundamental ethical principles? How many truths remain buried in the classified archives of governments around the world? Harrison's story isn't just about 1945 events. It's a mirror that reflects contemporary moral dilemmas about transparency, government accountability, and the price democratic societies pay when they allow secrecy to replace accountability. In the end, Thomas Harrison's helmet becomes a powerful metaphor for us all. Just as this simple object carried within it a story that would change lives and rewrite history, each of us has the potential to make a difference when we choose truth over convenience. Harrison teaches us that we don't have to be epic heroes to create lasting impact. We just need to have the courage to do what's right, even when no one is watching, even when the price seems too high. His voice, silenced in the waters of Pacific Beach, now resonates through the ages as an eternal call to the moral conscience of every generation. If you've been as impacted as we are by this extraordinary journey of discovery and courage, help us continue to reveal stories that deserve to be known. Your subscription to the channel isn't just a click, it's a vote of confidence in deep investigations that bring to light truths buried by time.